Welcome to our live stream. It is the 2nd of February 2020, and welcome all you soundies. I think this week we're doing the midday live stream. Next week we'll probably bump it to the later session just to try and accommodate everybody, but thanks for everybody who's able to join here today. And we will get started here. I did get a couple questions submitted ahead of time, so we're going to jump first to those. I'm going to just switch over here real quick. See if we can get that going here. All right. First up, we have a question from Blake. I love your channel videos. Hopefully I'll be able to make it, but my question is a bit longer as well. Currently, for talking head shoots, I use a single camera and a sound device is Mix Pre 6, the original version. I'm getting a second Canon DSLR. I operate solely off of a Slate. I import audio into Pro Tools and normalize there with Isotope RX, which has worked really well for me. I'm debating dropping the $800 on 3 Tentacle Sync e-boxes to save myself a headache. Slate syncing is not my favorite. With one camera, I imagine 2 cameras is worse. I know it comes with software to sync the video and audio automatically. My question is, can I just work with the audio only in Pro Tools, export it, and the time code is still preserved? Or how would you go about syncing the audio and video so you could work with just the audio in Pro Tools? I want to avoid using the video in Pro Tools because I personally am not a fan. Anytime I have done it, I have just split the audio off and used the raw video in a video editor. All right, Blake, that is a fine question. Let's just switch back here. I don't have a good picture of your entire workflow and where Pro Tools is fitting into that. So I don't know if you're just using Pro Tools to edit individual clips. If so, it should preserve the metadata and the time code should still be there. So that shouldn't be a problem. But if you're going to, if you're doing short pieces, like a lot of times for YouTube, doing a full cinema workflow doesn't necessarily make sense. And by full cinema workflow, what I mean is all of the assets, video and audio, are delivered to the editor. The editor syncs them up, does the edit, and then passes off an XML of some sort to the post audio mixing team. Now, if you're doing that type of workflow, you don't necessarily have to have the video in Pro Tools to do that. You can just export the XML file or the definition file of whatever type you're using. And at that point, the sync is already done, so you don't need to worry about it. So I'm not sure which of those workflows you're using, but yeah, either one should work. But if you're doing some sort of, like if you're processing all the clips together and you have them laid out on a timeline in Pro Tools, and then you export, I'm not sure that's necessarily going to work the way you want. So basically, you're just bringing it into Pro Tools, from what I can tell, doing the loudness normalization, and then saving a copy of that. And in that case, of a single clip. And in that case, everything should be fine. So hopefully that answers your question. Hopefully that was, if I understand that correctly. So thanks for that, Blake, and hope that works out well for you. All right, next one, we're going to switch over here. Klaus had an interesting question that I think will be fun for us to discuss here. Coming from a hi-fi background, I would like to ask about the digital signal chain if you use a wireless system. If you record using only one mic connected to your recorder with a cable, then you have only one analog to digital conversion. If you use wireless, then from the mic to the transmitter, you have an analog to digital conversion. From the receiver to the recorder, you have a digital to analog conversion in the receiver. Then at last, you go from analog to digital in the recorder, and yes, to analog again in the end. How does that extra conversion affect audio quality? Is this considered an issue when recording? And is there a wireless system who can connect digitally to a recorder? All fine questions. Now, you're making a little bit of an assumption there, which is fair in most cases, I think, and that is you're making the assumption that you're using a digital wireless system. Now, a lot of the modern wireless systems certainly are digital, but there are some that are not. For example, I don't believe the Sennheiser G3, G4s are, and some of the older Sonys are not, so it really depends. So that's the first thing. So you may not be doing a analog to digital and digital to analog conversion there. So that instead, what you'll get is any artifacts of a compander. Compander is a kind of a scheme that a lot of the analog wireless systems used, where they basically at the transmitter, they compress the audio and then they expand it when it gets back to the receiver. So you can get different types of artifacts that way, but they're not going to be digital conversion artifacts. So it's a different set of concerns. But in any case, your first question, does that extra conversion affect audio quality? The answer is, it depends. And I think it depends on the quality of the converters that you're using in the system. And that's going to be both at the wireless system and at the recorder. So I think that in some cases, it's not going to be a problem. It's, if you're using high enough quality converters in both your wireless system and your recorder, then I think most people would be hard pressed to hear a difference. But some people can, potentially. So, I think the answer to that is possibly. But, and I think ideally, if you can avoid it, that's ideal. And so, your final question was, is there a wireless system that can connect digitally to a recorder? And the answer is yes, there are several. Most of the Pro wireless systems will allow you to output an AES digital signal. So what that means is you're doing the analog to digital conversion at the transmitter in most cases, and then you send the digital signal, and then the digital signal is just streamed directly into the recorder, which takes the digital signal and writes it to media. So that, for example, is what I do often when I'm using my audio limited A10 system and working with my sound devices 888 or 633. So I can do that. And so, yeah, definitely at the high end. At the consumer and prosumer end, there is this, well, I would say this is more prosumer, but the Sony UWPD system, I believe, also does a similar thing, but it only works with their cameras. So basically you have a receiver that goes into a hot shoe that has a digital communication between the receiver and the camera. And so it does that conversion at the transmitter, and then it writes it directly into the camera's video clip file. So those are a couple that I can think of right off the top of my head. There may be others as well that do that, but hopefully that answers your question. I guess in short, does it make a difference? It can, and it certainly, I think you're going to notice that most if you're using consumer grade gear. But on the Pro end, it probably doesn't make as much of a difference, and they have facilities in many cases to not do the second conversion. They just send the digital stream straight into the recorder. In fact, Sound Devices recently released a new add-on for their Scorpio 888 and 833 that allows you to input even more digital AES streams. It's a little add-on thing that sits on top of the mixer. And I think it allows you to bring in 4 more ports, which is actually 8 additional channels of digital wireless or digital audio. In addition to, let's see, I think on the 833 and the 888, I think there's just one input of digital audio, one physical port that actually can take 2 streams of digital audio. So in any case, you can do a lot there. So, all right, Klaus, I hope that made sense. I hope it answers your question. I think ideally you should avoid that if you can, but if not, I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it. Use your ears to decide if it's a problem or not. And audiophiles might be able to tell a difference. Non-audiophiles probably will be hard-pressed to hear a difference if you're using decent, at least prosumer and higher grade gear. All right. I wanted to address a question. I do see that Bangs Naughty Bits is here. Thank you for joining us today. I think you left a note over on the video, or a comment over on the video. Today we released a video on the Zoom LiveTrack L8, little podcasting mixer recorder. And it had to do with the self-noise spec of the preamps. I need to look at that, but I think actually in answer to your question, it's actually the Rodecaster Pro and the LiveTrack L8. Rode and Zoom are using different ways to measure that. One is dBA weighted, using a specific method for measuring self-noise. And then the other one was using a dBu measurement of some sort. And I think that was the Zoom measurement. And Zoom didn't give a lot of details on how they measured that. But what I can say, so I guess in short, I'm not sure those can be compared as apples to apples, but what I can tell you from a very more subjective point of view is that the preamps in the L8 seem to be, in my experience with them so far, definitely a step above what you're seeing in the Zoom H6, H5, and H4n Pro. So it looks like they're actually different things there. Just for everyone, just for awareness. I don't know all the answers in terms of how they exactly measured that, but there's some thoughts there. So yeah, it is a EIN or the input noise. All right, Kevin, thank you for the super chat, and I'm really glad that you were able to join. And he says because you're an audio. Okay, I'm going to take that as an audio awesome guy. Thanks for that, Kevin. All right, let's go. Oh, actually, there's something that we wanted to talk about. So I've been working on, and maybe some of you have experienced this as well, and have some answers here. But I've been struggling with this live streaming setup has gotten certainly better than it was. There's still room for improvement, certainly, but from a technology point of view, there's some challenges I've had. Now, I'm using Ecamm Live as a software that runs on the computer here to actually send the stream off to YouTube. I'm using, as far as hardware is concerned, I'm using the Blackmagic ATEM Mini now. That's a fairly recent addition this year. And so that takes two cameras. So you can see I have a camera here where I can show stuff if I need to. And then, of course, we have our head cam here. I've actually been experimenting with using this to work on my courses because I think it's a really nice, it's be able to switch back and forth, or even I could do picture in picture if I wanted to as well. Not really into that. I mean, I guess there are probably places where it makes sense, but I don't know if this is even, let's see if I can get it going here. Yeah, so I think that's what you're seeing here. So actually, let's try it for a little bit. So what I've been struggling with though is that while Ecamm Live seems to do pretty decently for streaming to YouTube, there's something that it's doing in terms of frame rates. It only records whole frame rates. So 24, 30, 50, and 60, I think, are the options that it gives you, which is, I'm going to write to them. They're actually usually very responsive, but they really should be handling the fractional frame rates as well, the 23.976, so on and so forth. So what's interesting about it, though, is if I put my cameras in true 24 frame mode, and we'll get back to audio here in just a second. It's kind of not directly related, but indirectly related. It's still doing something funny. So in any case, what I've been resorting to, let's just show you this here. I want to pop these out. Got these. I've got a little. I don't know if any of you remember back in these days. So I was recording to my an Atomos Shogun. Actually, here's the Ninja 2 that you can kind of see. It's got a big battery on it. I was trying to pull that off, but it doesn't. There we go. It decided to come off finally. Okay. This little funny thing, and it's an SSD recorder. It records just high definition, doesn't do 4K. Runs on two Sony NPF or L mount series batteries. Has a horrible, horrible screen that you can't make any judgments from in terms of color quality or anything like that. It's got a horrible blue tint to it, and it's just not very high resolution. It has a kind of it's not a regular capacitive touch screen. It's one of those older style membrane touch screens, and it gets fingerprints on it, even worse than most capacitive touch screens. So it was the very first HDMI recorder I ever purchased many years ago. But I've been actually using this because the Shogun and the Sumo both have fans in them. And the fans, you don't have to keep them relatively close because I'm using them as a monitor and a recorder. And finally, I resorted to using this because it has no fan. Now, granted, I understand it doesn't have a fan. It's only doing HD. It's, feature-wise, it's not running as complex an operating system as the newer ones. The screen is much lower resolution. There's probably just, in terms of its thermal envelope, it's not generating nearly as much heat, so it doesn't need a fan. But then I did a search to see if I could find an alternative recorder that doesn't have a fan, that has a lot of the other features, like being able to record 4K or UHD at least, and has some, a better screen, certainly better than this screen. And I came up short. The only thing I found was the Convergent Design Odyssey something Q7 Plus, I think it's called. But it almost seems like that company is on the verge of going out of business, maybe. And they haven't updated that product in a number of years. The last firmware update was in March 2018. So I'm a little, and when I went to go buy it, it looks like it's almost like they're selling what they have in stock, because a lot of places don't have it, or maybe they're replacing it with their next product up, which is actually more of a switcher. So anyway, there, if any of you know of a recorder that does record UHD and does not have a fan, I would love to know about it. Other than the Odyssey, I'll look more into the Odyssey and see what's going on there. But in any case, I do have concerns. It seems like so much of the camera equipment now is including fans. LED lights almost all include fans. The camera, all the cinema cameras have fans in them. Some of them manage the amount of noise that they make better than others, but some of them are just a nightmare. And so what that means is as soon as you're doing a close-up, and you're working in really close, like you're doing for product shots oftentimes, then, sound suffers. You're going to have to pick up that sound and either do some cleanup in the end. So anyway, it's just, I'm looking for something that solves that problem. Tyler Edwards comments here, I hate using the Odyssey. Yeah, I mean, none of them are great because it's another piece of gear that has to sit on the rig. Fortunately, in this case, it would be on a desk as opposed to a rig. So in any case. All right, let's head out to the comments here. Slav Guns, looking forward to this one, though I'll be driving at the time, I think. Okay, well, be careful out there. Have a safe drive. Bala, thanks a lot, sir, in advance from India. Thanks for joining us today. Kevin finally made it. Kevin, the basic filmmaker, thank you for joining our live stream here. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. And Mark, hooray, European live stream, right on. Greetings from everybody. All right, Bugs, thanks for coming by. You can't join today, but good to have you here. And Thomas, good to have you here as well. Norlis is here. All right. Bangs Naughty Bits. Red Giants Pluralize might be useful for syncing audio after editing in another app. That's another possibility as well. So back to the question from Blake in regards to laying down $800 for Tentacle Syncs. Pluralize is worth looking at as well. Pluralize, I think, is probably more in the $300 range, so it'd be less expensive. It still relies on you getting good or decent quality scratch audio, so you're still going to need to do that. But if you do that on each of the cameras, then Pluralize, in my experience, works very reliably, so that's worth it. That's worth looking at as well. So thanks for that, Bangs. That's a good point there. All right. Kev finally can put that wheel away. That's because Kevin finally came. All right. Kevin, would you share your current settings for audio for this episode? Shure SM7B plus mix pre, gain, input, anything else in the line sounds great. Okay. Let's talk about that. Yes, we are using... hopefully I can do this without disconnecting anything. Here we have the original Mix Pre 10T, just the one I happen to have out right now. I actually, just to avoid any issues with ground loops or anything, I'm using a battery to power it, just because I have so much equipment interconnected here. I've got the ATEM Mini, I've got a monitor off of that, I've got 2 cameras. I found that sometimes if I use AC power, I would pick up some sort of buzzing noise, so in this particular case, I am using that battery. As far as settings are concerned, am I going to be brave enough to do this? Let's see what happens here without pulling anything out or turning anything over. See if I can get that focused better. Okay, there we go. As far as you can see, all of these are red. That means they're muted. I have made the mistake of not muting them before, so as a matter of course, and just to be safe, that's actually good mixing practice. Any channels you're not using should really be either disabled and or muted in as much as possible, just to save yourself that grief. As far as gain, it looks like we're at 62 dB. We're coming in with the SM7B directly into input 1 here. Of course, I do have the limiters on to save me there. And then the other setting here that would be most relevant, I believe, is going to be the output. And you can see the X gain is actually set to minus 35 dB. That's coming out of the 3.5 millimeter output right here, and that's running into the Panasonic GH5S, which is my head camera. That's the main one right here that you see. So that's and then of course the input level on the GH5S is set to -12, which is its lowest setting. So that's how we're doing things here today. Hey, your comment needs to go down a little bit, so we're just going to move that down. There you go. Does that make sense? Did I get everything, Kevin? If I didn't, let me know. We'll take another shot at it. All right. Glenn, big hello from London. Thanks for joining us here. All right, Mark. I keep trying to do talking headshots, but my audio keeps recording nothing but silence. Do the heads still need to be attached to their bodies? The participants seem a bit divided on the matter. Good one, Mark. Thanks for that. All right, Bang's Naughty Bits. I usually run an SM7B at 60 dB with gain if streaming, as it is quieter than other people. If I use less gain, I normally use for podcast recording. That is, yeah, we were at 62, so we were really, really, very, very close there. So I agree. That's a mic that needs a fair bit of gain. That also can be a guide too if you're looking at purchasing a recorder of some sort. So, for example, the Zoom LiveTrack L8 maxes out at 54 dB. So what I found with that in the review that we posted earlier today was that if you are not live streaming, that's probably going to be fine. You can do some normalization in post, and the self-noise performance was still quite good on that, and I didn't see any problems with doing that as long as you have a quiet room. But the self-noise generated in the recorder itself was at a very good level. So I think that's possible. But if you're live streaming, then that's where something like a max of 54 dB may not be enough, and so that's where I ended up using a FET head, sort of the mic activator. So anyway, there's some thoughts there on that. All right, I usually bounce around 55 to 60 dB if I'm just recording audio. Yep. Agreed. Klaus. It makes sense. Okay, very good. Thanks for the question, Klaus. Really appreciate that. And I would be curious too. You can, if you do some tests, it'd be interesting to know if there was some way you could use the same microphone for a wired connection and a wireless connection. If you could play it back on your hi-fi system, and if you could tell a difference. Anyway, interesting thought there, and it is an interesting question. All right, Bang's Naughty Bits was talking about the EIN, the input noise, and you run the podcasting subreddit. Excellent. I need to check that out. Thanks for that. That is a massive contribution to the world. And I mean that seriously. That is really, really good. And I appreciate when people do things like that. Thanks for helping out with that. All right. Trevor asks about the Deity HD TX versus the Rode XLR TX kit. I don't have Deity gear, but have the Rode Link gear. I don't know that there's any reason to switch necessarily, at least in terms of audio quality. I think you're going to get I've actually had pretty good luck with the Rode Link. The Deity is good too. The Deity has a little bit more self-noise in some situations. Like my HDTX didn't seem to do very well with dynamic microphones. There was felt like we were pushing the preamps to their very limit. And so there was a lot of self-noise in the reception, even after kind of, there's a fellow by the name of Nick that has done a lot of work, again, great contribution to the community, to figure out kind of the optimal settings to set the input level on the transmitter and the output level on the receiver to kind of fine-tune the self-noise performance. But with a dynamic microphone, I haven't used the Rode, I think they call it the news shooter. Is that what they call that transmitter, if that's what you're referring to specifically? I have not used that one, so I have not ever personally tested it. The samples I've heard sound pretty good. But my sense is that there may be, and this is a working hypothesis again because I've never used it, that you might get better results with dynamic microphones with the Rode, but I'm not sure. That's still to be tested. So if anyone has any experience with both of those firsthand, let us know. Definitely looking for that. Oh, Thomas just received his MixPre 3.2 on Thursday to replace an old Zoom H4n, massive Massive improvement. I'm so glad to hear that. Congratulations on the new recorder. Um, I'm glad that you're finding that there is a massive improvement because yeah, I agree. There is definitely. Luigi, hello. Looks like you have a comment down below. We'll get to that in just a second. It's also a big step up in complexity from consumer gear. Curtis's course helped enormously. Yes, and that's probably something that I'm a little bit blinded to. I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm a little bit blinded to it, and that's why I think, for example, every review is subjective, and it's important to keep that in mind. So, on the one hand, because I've used a fair bit of different pieces of audio gear, I can compare and contrast them pretty decently. But the problem is that I know how all this stuff works generally, and so sometimes it's hard for me to speak in terms that people that are used to working with consumer gear understand. So it's there is a challenge there, and so that's why, just kind of to underscore this whole theme of never rely on a single source generally you should not rely on a single source to make a determination about which gear to buy. So that's just something to keep in mind there. But Thomas, I'm really happy to hear that you're having a good experience with the MixPre 3.2, and Trevor does too. Hear, hear. All right, back over to Luigi. Will you be adding a section on your MixPre course covering the new 6 firmware? Thanks for the excellent support. Yes, in fact, I have updated some of the segments already. In fact, what I'm starting to do now is every time I update one of the segments, I'm putting the firmware that we used and the date that it was updated, so you'll have that information. In fact, if I have time tonight, which is my hope that I will, I'm going to be working on another one of the segments and updating it. It's one of I think it's one of the segments in the menus where the menus work generally the same. Not a lot has changed, but there are a few additional options, and I want to go over those as well. So if you have any question about when it was created, on the newer ones, you're going to see a firmware version and a date on those. So yes, we're definitely going to be doing those as well. All right. Receptixful. Cool name. Thoughts on the Sony UWP D21 versus Sennheiser G4? Unfortunately, no experience with the Sony on my part. But if anyone else does, so I believe this is Sony's new digital wireless system. G4, I believe, is still a mostly analog system. So if anyone has information on those two, definitely share with us. I've used the G3 a fair bit, and it's a solid piece. It takes a while to set up. You gotta understand kind of the basics of RF theory and know how to, you got to set frequencies, so on and so forth, and be willing to scan and take that time, so on and so forth. Not a huge issue. That's all the pro systems you still have to do that too, but that's one thing. I don't know if I think the UWP D21, I shouldn't talk. I don't know. If anyone has input on those, let us know. I would like to try the Sony system at some point. LP Scene, thanks very much for the super chat, and you're welcome for all the work. I'm glad to hear that it's helpful for you. All right, Bangs Naughty Bits. The Ecamm peeps have been doing a number of Ecamm Academy live streams on YouTube, usually Thursdays during your midday. Well, that's something worth checking out. I appreciate the tip on that. Thank you. Done with the wheel. Okay, good. Are you using the HDMI out for going into the computer? No. So on the ATEM Mini, as what I assume you're talking about, Mark, I'm actually feeding that via USB from the ATEM Mini into the computer. The HDMI out is going to a separate monitor that I use here to kind of set focus and exposure and framing and all that business. So it also is helpful because then I know which without having to look up at the computer screen, because it's down a little bit lower, it allows me to see, it's easier for me to see it from down here. It's just right out of the frame right here. So that's what we're doing there. Fans often are bad in first-gen hardware, and they get better when second generation comes out. Yeah, although I have been at NAB. I've been invited to the Atomos. They hold a dinner, usually once per NAB show, and I've been invited the last 3 years. I've been able to go 2 of the 3 times. I would like to talk to Jeremy, who is their CEO, and just level with him and say, look, dude, the fans don't seem to be getting better. I haven't used the Ninja 5 and I haven't used the Shogun 7, so I can't say on those. I've never actually been anywhere near them, so I haven't had a chance to evaluate those. But the Sumo is definitely not I guess it's a first generation of the large monitors, and the Shogun I have is the first gen. But I have used the Ninja Inferno, which was a second gen product, and its fan was still pretty bad too. But I would like to see them improve that, and I think there's an opportunity there. It could also potentially solve their kind of build quality. They're using a lot of plastic in those builds, and mine's held up okay, but if they put a big heat sink on there, I think that would solve two problems potentially. They could go without a fan potentially, and number two, they could get a kind of a beefier build as well. There are costs. That, of course, is probably going to cost more, perhaps significantly more. But anyway, I think you're right. Usually the fan design improves. I'd still like to see some improvement from Atomos on that front. All right, Brandon Williams. I use an F6, so I assume a Zoom F6 with a Sennheiser G2 and G3 and AVX. And it sounds like the self-noise from being wireless is far more noticeable than other recorders. Could this be to the dual AD converters causing this issue? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I suppose that's a viable hypothesis worth testing. What I think could be going on is I don't know how you have your receivers oriented. What I do find is that if your receivers are very close to each other, especially the antennas are close to each other, that can start to muddle things up there. And because the F6 is so small, there's a good possibility that maybe that's what you're running into. I don't know, again, how you have things configured. It could also be a shielding issue. It could be that the F6 is not well shielded. I have not used it a lot for production audio, so I don't know. I mostly did a bunch of tests when I first got it, but I haven't used it in cases where I'm using a lot of wireless, so I haven't extensively tested that. But I'd be curious of other people's experience. If any of you have used the F6 and a lot of wireless at the same time, we'd love to know about it and what your experience has been. But the first thing I would try, Brandon, if there's any way you can, that AVX, you can actually plug that receiver directly into the XLR input. But if you can, I would use the cable. Well, I would use a cable to extend it and get it away from the other receivers, if possible, just to see if that makes a difference. Not necessarily, I realize it may not be practical to work that way always, but at least it will help you narrow down the issue, and that's worth checking. All right. From Bangs again, have you noticed the MixPre 6 in your case exposes Jack 1 and Jack 2 to software like Skype and Ecamm Live? This is different than most multi-channel devices. I have not noticed that specifically. So it does not. Oh yeah. So I don't know if I'm not sure if I understand how it's different than most other devices. So if you, I'm on a Mac here, so it's using Core Audio. So when I connect via USB-C to my Mac, there's an app, and in fact, I may just pull this up. Audio MIDI setup. Let's see if we can show this to you. So there's this app here. And what it allows you to do, right now I don't have the MixPre connected to the computer via USB, but here, for example, here's the universal audio. This is essentially allows you to map all of the inputs and outputs. And usually any multi-track device that I plug into the Mac, the software recognizes, well, if the software is capable of recognizing multiple inputs, it will. So I haven't noticed a difference there, but I'm curious if there's something that you're noticing there too. Now, if you plug in and you're in class compliant mode, like the Zoom recorders, for example, you can operate in one of two different modes. You can use an ASIO driver on Windows, or you can plug in what's called class compliant mode. In class compliant mode, I think it's just sending a stereo mix. And then in the multi-track mode, it's doing the same thing that I just described here. So that may be something. Maybe that's part of the factor. Not sure, but good question there. Roman, I have a question about the MixPre Slate mic. What is it for, and how do you use it? Someone mentioned it can be used as a communication with a boom op. Yes. So basically, the Slate Mic allows you to, well, you can set up its routing, so you can choose which inputs and which outputs it routes to. So what a lot of mixers will do is they'll actually set it up so that it only goes to their boom operator. So they'll only route it to whatever output is feeding the wireless feed for their boom op. And that way they can hit the Slate Mic and say, hey, can you please go check so-and-so's wireless system? Looks like we've lost them and we need some fresh batteries. Or, or they can also talk to their utility if they have a utility. But that's one thing it can be used for. Another thing it can be used for too is that sometimes when you are, and this is where it gets its name, when you're actually calling out the slate, when the AC is calling out the slate, what you can do is if the microphones aren't close to the slate, you can use your Slate Mic, and that will pick up what the AC is saying before they do the clapper. So that's another purpose. And what it does in that case is normally you would route that to all channels, or at least to the stereo mix, generally all channels. So all that'll be recorded. So editorial has that, and they can hear what this particular clip is for, which scene take, so on and so forth. So those are kind of the two main things that I've heard in terms of what the Slate Mic is used for. So hopefully that makes some sense here. All right, E67 has a question here. What do you think about Nagr recorders like Nagr 6 and Nagr 7? I saw that you asked that question, I think, as a comment as well, and I will get to that. I unfortunately have never used a Nagr recorder. I started in my career once digital had already hit, my audio career once digital had already hit. I'd actually shot film on the camera side, not motion film, but just still film. But I never have used the Nagr. Nagr is a company that, for those that are not familiar with Nagr, in prior to the digital age of audio recording, Nagras were the most common recorders you found used by professionals that did location and production sound. And some of the early ones were only like mono and stereo recorders. And then I think they added multi-track later, I believe. And these were all recorded reel-to-reel tape. So they ran on C-cell batteries or D-cell batteries. I don't remember which one. I've never actually used one. But they did a really nice job. There was a reason why all the pros chose them. They sounded really great. They were, I don't know how reliable they were. There were a lot of mechanical pieces, but also just as a kind of a gee whiz kind of piece of information. When you're working on set, typically the director will call for everyone to get set. Camera will start rolling, and a sound you hear the sound recordist call is either the recordist or the boom op or whomever. No, well, it will usually be the mixer, will say sound speed. And what that refers to specifically is that when you started recording on a Nagr reel-to-reel recorder or any reel-to-reel recorder, there was a period of time for the recorder to spin up before it got to full speed. Because otherwise, if you called, basically, if you said, I'm ready too soon, and people started, actually talking and you're recording that, it wouldn't be fully up to speed and the recording wouldn't work right. It's like when you record something too fast or too slow, you get the chipmunk or the kind of the low frequency roar, 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 roar experience. So that's where the term sound speed came from. It wasn't that the recorder was started at that moment. It was that the recorder was up to speed and ready to go. So that's where the sound speed came from. But no, I've never used the Nagr 6 or 7. I think they're great. I mean, I would expect them to be great. I have never used them. I don't know anyone specifically that has used them. They're definitely on the expensive side, and that's about all I know about them. So, in any case, all right. Curtis Judd Audio. The buzz. Thank you. That's what's been happening. I'll check it out. So I think that was in reference to powering via battery. So just good. I hope that solves the problem, Kevin. Thanks for asking on that one. All right, Roman has another question. How to sync delayed audio from Deity Connect wireless system? Well, it depends. If you're recording a boom microphone and several Deity Connect at the same time, if you're in low latency mode, you may not need to do anything. If you go into one of the higher latency modes, actually in low latency mode, it's still 20 or 19 milliseconds or somewhere around there, so you might have to do some. But what you're going to have to do is just manually nudge it, or I know that the Tentacle Sync Studio app on Mac gives you the ability to offset things, but the problem is if you offset everything, that's going to put the boom out of sync then. So unfortunately, I think it's a manual thing. Now, if you're recording just wireless, it's a non-issue, because if you're going to be syncing via timecode, you can apply that offset. Pardon me. You can apply that offset in software. Again, the Tentacle Sync Studio software allows you to apply that offset. You can, before you sync everything up, you can say, hey, apply a X second or X millisecond delay or latency on everything. And so you can get everything perfectly in sync that way. So those are kind of my thoughts there. I don't know if some of the other, like if I think about just the nonlinear editors, I don't know if they allow you to apply any sort of latency or any sort of delay. Another thing you can do is some of the recorders allow you to do that in the recorder itself, and that actually probably would be a better solution. So in that case, what I would probably do is apply a delay to the boom mic, and then all the rest of the wireless will be in sync with that. So that's another thing you can do to approach the problem. So thanks for that. Nice socks mod. Okay. All right, Slav Guns. Hey. Arm bread. They did not say anything about fan noise. I'm not sure what that's in reference to, other than the talk about the recorders we were talking about earlier. All right, Greg. So when you use sync boxes, you only get down to the frame level of sync, 40 milliseconds at 24 frames per second. Do you normally then sync the audio subframe to scratch audio? I have not. I've usually gotten better results than 40 milliseconds. It seems like, just subjectively, Greg. It's a fair question. It seems like it depends on what you're working with. 40 seconds, of course, is going to be more of a rule of thumb than a hard and fast for every situation, but it depends. I guess it just depends on the results. If it's feeling like it's out of sync subjectively, then yeah, I'll go in and make some changes to it. But I have to confess, I don't use timecode all that often. I use it in the bigger pieces that I work on, in the narrative pieces. So last weekend we were working on a piece, and we used timecode there. The editor will usually be responsible for syncing things up more closely. If he's not satisfied with the results, I can help him out there if he asks for help, but usually we don't. So if I'm shooting a YouTube video, I don't bother, because I'm usually not coming back with that many clips. So for me, like a regular YouTube video or a lot of the corporate video that I do is very, very straightforward, a lot of interviews. And so usually I come back with 5 or 6, usually less than 10 clips total. And I just don't usually do timecode, because I'm operating all by myself. So it's one less thing in the kind of production workflow that I have to do. And the post cost is not that high. So that's not usually mine. But I'm curious about you, Greg. Definitely on narrative pieces where you're coming back with a lot more footage and a much more complex production, that's where I usually do it. And so I think it makes a little more sense there. So you may have to nudge things around there too. Linus Text Tips has just finished a DIY water cooling a Red 8K camera. Reach out and see if he's willing to do a Ninja 5. I'll do that. Thanks, Mark. All right. Ever consider using the NTG 5 for live streaming? Yes. This room is pretty good. You can see I have some bass traps in the background. Here is one here, another one here. How do I reach these? It's all backwards. There's another one behind there, another one behind me. There are 2 on the ceiling. But I do have a hard tile floor here. Yeah, I certainly could. I've just got so many microphones that this one is usually the one that's mounted, so this is the one I've stuck with for the most part. But yeah, I think it could be a fine option for that, Tyler. Totally a good option. Just did my first live stream and ran the NTG5 into my C200, then SDI out to Ultra Studio Mini recorder. Sounded pretty good. Totally agree. Yep. And actually, I think that the Canon Cinema line actually does pretty decently on their preamplifiers. It's been my experience as well, the C100, C200, and I'm sure the higher end ones as well. But yeah, that sounds like a great, and the NTG5 is a microphone with a good hot output, so it seems like a good combination. So yeah, definitely a good shot there. All right. A good dynamic mic is more forgiving of people walking around upstairs. Tyler, yes. So that's actually part of the reason I do that here. That's why I mentioned all the treatment, and yet I still use this. There are people doing stuff at this house. We have a couple of musicians, although our younger musician has gone off to college, so she's not here quite as often. But yeah, people walking around, living their lives. And so this just makes it a little easier from that standpoint. But I think a boom mic, if you've got the right space, could definitely do the job as well. A small condenser or a large diaphragm condenser will have better quality, but it's about trade-offs. And agreed there. Lawn Justice. Got a phone call. Not sure if you're able to get to my question. Well, put it up here and let's see what we can do here. Tyler, makes sense. Guess it's good that I work upstairs then. Yeah, I'm downstairs here. So yeah, but if you've got a space that works, it's good. Albert, Mr. Judd, do you think I should replace my Zoom? I assume that's the F8 with the MixPre 6. No, I wouldn't think so, unless the Zoom F8 is doing something that you don't like. But no, I don't think I don't think your audio quality in and of itself is necessarily going to get a whole lot better. So unless you have a specific reason or a specific problem you're trying to solve, I'd stick with your Zoom F8. Alarm Clock Films, is there going to be 32-bit capable wireless systems coming? All of the systems that I know of are dynamic range limited. I would guess in the future, yes. I think we're going to start to see that now. Tentacle has their body pack recorder, not a wireless transmitter, that does 32-bit recording with dual A to D converters. The challenge is that's more information to transmit, and we're getting more and more in most countries, certainly in the United States, with all of the wireless communications. They're kind of squeezing the frequencies that we're allowed to use for wireless microphones. However, I do think that we will at some point get to that. Now, one thing to consider is that even if they do that on the wireless systems, lavalier microphones in particular tend to be fairly dynamic range limited as well. So, I mean, even some of the really good ones are somewhere around 110 dB dynamic range. So you could still run into the microphone being the dynamic range limiting factor. But yeah, I think eventually we'll probably see that. All right, back to fan noise. The Ninja 5 is pretty bad on the fan noise to the point of dual mounting both a Ninja 5 and a shotgun microphone on top of the camera doesn't work. From painful personal experience. That was my suspicion. So I've suspected that was going to be the case with the Ninja 5, sadly, because that looks like a cool little recorder. And it looks like Benham agrees on the Ninja 5. Gosh, manufacturers, we need to get the word out there to these manufacturers that fans are not always okay. Sometimes you have to do it, but if you're going to do it, at least put as much design as you can into keeping it quiet. So for example, the Canon C200 has a fan in it, but and it's funny if you put it on a shoulder rig, it's right in your ear. So that's a bigger problem for the camera operator than it is for the shotgun mic on top necessarily. But again, it's just like all these camera manufacturers and those that are serving the camera manufacturers or the camera world just seem to. It's funny and it's sad because I feel like convergent design. I've used the Odyssey or the I think it's the Odyssey. I've used it before, and its menu system is like crazy. Like I will say that Atomos has done a better job on the menu system, from my experience. So it's not necessarily the most pleasant thing to work with, but it didn't have a fan. They actually put a lot of effort into designing it so that it wouldn't have a fan, And to me, it's sad to see that they have really Atomos owns that market, that HDMI and SDI recorder market now, where I feel like there's definitely some value to what Convergent Design has done. And so if I had confidence that they were going to be around for a while, I'd probably buy one. But that's the thing I'm lacking right now, which is a sad kind of state of affairs. But I think we can make a difference by being clear, and I'll be clear too, that I'm just not digging all of these fans. All right, Law and Justice, here is your question. If you are solo when recording on a MixPre 10.2, will it mess with the recording? I've watched a lot of people talking about doing headphone mixes to monitor ISO. Let me see if I can understand this here. Oh, yeah. When you solo an individual input, no, that's just your monitor. It's just in the headphones. It's not going to mess with the recording, so you shouldn't have any problem there. That's if I understand your question correctly. When you go into solo mode on most recorders and most mixing boards, that's just so that you can make some minor adjustments. The recording is still going to record everything. It's going to record all the isolated microphone channels plus a stereo mix, but the solo is just for monitoring. So that's usually how that works. So thanks for the question. That is a good one. All right, Jack, have you ever used the Sennheiser MKE 600? And also, do you think the Audio Technica AT4053B is outdated? I don't remember if it was the MKE 600 I have used. My brother has one of the Sennheisers, the kind of $300 to $400 shotgun mics from Sennheiser. I used that once. It was okay. It sounded a little too bright for my tastes. I don't know if it was the MKE 600 or not. So I'm sorry I can't answer that question. I do need to. I would like to get my hands on some of those because I know a lot of people, are operating in budgets in that area, and I would like to have some information for them. So that's that answer. Audio Technica 4053B, is it outdated? I don't think so. That's the thing with microphones. A good microphone doesn't outdate quickly. And I said a good microphone doesn't outdate quickly. So no, I don't think so. In fact, I think that there is a relative dearth of other options in that particular price range. And if I remember correctly, that's a $600 or $700 microphone. No, I don't think so. For its performance, I think it's hitting at about the $1,000 level. So even today, so I don't know. I don't think it's personally. I don't think it's anything that's outdated there. All right, Brandon, thanks for the answer. I have been able to use RX7 to help with the noise, but that can cause some tinny results, so I lose out on quality either way. The receivers and antennas are pretty far apart. Okay. It could be a shielding issue with the F6, so I'm really not sure if anyone else has input on that, or if I get to a point where I can hook a bunch of wireless up, I'll let you know what we find out here. Okay, back to the multi-track from the MixPre series. So Bang says, most multi-channel devices expose Jack 1 only to common audio devices like Skype and Ecamm. Oh, okay. So somehow Sound Devices has found a way to work around that. I'll keep my eye on that. I appreciate that. All right, Just Samson, thanks for the super chat. Love your channel. Is it possible to record audio from a MixPre 3.2 and video from camera, both into an external recorder like the Ninja 5? I'm trying to get clean synced audio into an external. Yes, it is certainly possible. You have a couple of different options. You can feed the audio from the MixPre into your camera, the EOS R. There's going to be a little bit of a sacrifice there because then at that point you'll be using the EOS R's. You can actually basically bypass the preamp, but you'll still be using its analog to digital converter, it might be okay for what you're trying to do, it might not. So that's one option. Probably not the preferred option. The other option is to record the audio directly into the Ninja 5 and the video into the Ninja 5, but what you'll need to do is some testing ahead of time, and in the Ninja 5 they have a facility for applying a delay to the audio, because what'll happen is with most cameras, the HDMI, there's quite a bit of latency on the HDMI output, so it'll take the video longer to get to the Ninja 5 than it will take the audio to get there. So you apply a delay in the Ninja 5 for the audio, and that will get it in sync again. So I I did that previously. In fact, I did that way back in the day, I think with my Ninja 2 here, when I was recording audio from probably like a Tascam DR100 Mark II and probably my Panasonic GH4 back in the day. But yeah, they have that facility for doing that. Actually, it may have been when I got to the Shogun that I did that. But yes, the Ninja 5 has that capability. So that'll allow you to do that. All right. Thanks for that, Jess Sampson. Mark, it's more about heat dissipation rate. Small devices usually fit small fans, so they need to run faster to move enough air. Understood. Slap a larger radiant sink on and a larger fan, and you can run it quieter. Agreed. Or if you can get away with it, like Convergent Design appears to be able to do, then you can do it even without a fan if you have a big enough heat sink. Oh, you almost had an open mic moment because of that. I didn't fade down Jack 2. That's a good thing. Yeah, and as you saw, what we talked about earlier here, I now mute everything because I've had that experience too. You have to, yeah, definitely don't leave open channels. Never a good idea. Lesson for us all. Last week I disassembled a couple of LED panels to change the fans on them. Tiny things, but so noisy. Replaced with Noctuas and took a fair few dB off. You, my friend, I might hire you to help out then. If I send over my Atomos Sumo, can you retrofit it with better fans? It's a great, I mean, well, it's not an amazing monitor, but it's a pretty good monitor. They call it HDR, but I don't really, back in that generation, it's just high brightness. It's not HDR. But in any case, good job, Mark. All right, Blake, thanks for answering the question. Yes, the assumption was right. I am just doing dialogue edits in Pro Tools and then doing timeline edits in the video editor. Just wanted to make sure the exports would sync. I think they should, Blake. Yeah, they should hold on to that metadata, so it should be fine. All right. Tom, on the ATEM Mini, are you able to set resolution and frame rate from software in addition to it auto-sensing the first connected device? Well, I probably shouldn't test that right now because we have a good thing going, but I need to check that. So let's just come in here to the ATEM software control. I'm not going to actually change it, but what we will do here, let's put this up on the screen so you can see it. Okay. Media player, palettes. I don't know if there's anything that allows you to do that. And it might actually be the ATEM setup. I guess when you're using it, it doesn't like you. Whoops. Here we go. Whoops. Preferences, here we go. I'm not seeing anything. So I think the answer might be no, but I'm not positive. I'll have to spend a little more time with it, Tom. But I did not see, and if anyone else knows, let me know. I'm not an advanced user on the ATEM by any means. I confess to that openly, but fine question. Alan, thanks for joining us. Did you change your name from Rowland Man? Alan says, my Nagr 4.2 is pretty awesome. I'm curious, Alan, do you actually use that for production jobs, or is it more of a thing that is just kind of cool, and so you just can't bear to part with it? I'm curious. All right, Mark. They should cover the entire back of the next Atomos with a heatsink, in my opinion, make the SSD a full slot, and mount a heatsink on the back with heat pipes from inside. Completely agree. They already use heat pipes, even in the original Shogun. Now they just need to put a huge heatsink instead of a huge fan. All right. E67, there's some input. So, Alan, definitely share your experience with the Nagras. Would love to hear it. Nagr don't make reel-to-reel nowadays. It's all digital. Yes, I think that's true. Thanks for the clarification. I'm sorry I didn't clarify that with, I believe, the Nagr 7, and I think the 6 is as well. So, All right, Ray, I've decided on a Mix Pre 3.2. Should I consider the 6.2 for a modest price difference? I think the differences are going to be that you will get combination XLR TRS input jacks on the 6 versus the 3, and you'll get one more XLR input. Those are the main differences. It's a little bit bigger as well, so if you need to keep things really, really small, the 3 actually has an advantage there. In fact, let's see if we can do this here. Get you a little focus that. Camera's going to shake. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can get something to reference this by. This is one of the bigger phones. This is the iPhone XS Max, the big iPhone. So that should hopefully give you a sense for the size of the Mix Pre 3. It's really small for a recorder with 3 XLR inputs. In addition to that, I believe on this, if you use all 3 XLR inputs, you cannot also use the aux input at the same time. So if you're going to run a wireless system into that, you're a little bit more limited. So with the 6, you get 4 XLR inputs, combination, XLR TRS inputs, plus you can also use the auxiliary input to take a feed from a wireless mic if you wanted to do that at the same time. So that's where you're going to see the differences mainly. The screen is pretty much the same. You also get the star key on the 6, which is a kind of basically a programmable key, a shortcut key, if you will. The 3 does not have that. So those are the main differences between the 3 and the 6. So is it worth it? I mean, it's really for you to decide and what you'll be shooting with, what situations you'll be in. But my first one was actually the original Mix Pre 6, and I didn't regret that. This time I bought the 3.2 just because I needed to have, for the courses that I'm putting together, I needed to have something that I could show the smaller ones with as well, because I have the 10T and the 10.2. Actually, let's do that. I can show you this as well. The 10 is significantly bigger. This is the 10. Actually, this is the original 10. This is the 10T. Let's see how much bigger that is. Just to give you a sense there. So I don't know, everyone else, I don't know what other input people have, but by all means, share that here with Ray as he makes his decision. Good luck, Ray. Okay, Thomas. Yes, this is something I forgot to mention in the question before about wireless transmitters. 32-bit float is only useful if there are dual AD converters upstream from that. 24-bit integer has about 120 dB dynamic range, which matches single AD range, and is a lot if it's a good preamp. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So that is one thing that I didn't clarify earlier. Now, I should also say, on that same topic, Zaxcom already has wireless systems that record, or that have a feature called Never Clip. So the transmitters have dual analog to digital converters in them. They technically record to a file format called MARF, which is a mobile audio recording format. It's their own proprietary format. And they have a way of actually fitting the wider dynamic range audio within a 24-bit MARF file. So they went about it a different way. The other companies, Sound Devices and Zoom, are instead using 32-bit float files to do that, as opposed to their own proprietary file format. So yeah, so there are some of those out there already. So Zaxcom already does it. So there is that. And yes, everything, Thomas, you're absolutely right. And thanks for the clarification. All right, Daniel. Canon solved the fan exhaust issue with the C500 Mark II. The exhaust is on the other side now. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, the C200, it was funny. For me, it's not an issue. I actually would like to get a C200, but don't tell my wife. Just kidding. You can tell her. She knows. But I can't quite justify it. But yeah, that was just a funny thing. And even so, I don't do a lot of shoulder rigging with my cameras, so wouldn't be an issue for me. But that's cool that they put it on the other side. That makes sense. Tom, regarding adding delay in recorder, on the F4, it is applied to the stereo mix tracks and not isolated tracks. Assuming similar for other recorders? Let's take a look here. Give me just a second here. Just need to grab a power cable. Okay. Let's see what we got on the mix pre here. That looks like it's in focus. Okay. I need to remember where that delay is. I believe you can do it here on the mix pre per channel. So each channel has one of those. And so what I don't know, to your point, Tom, I don't know if it's applying the delay to the isolated channel and when it sends it to the mix, or if it's just delaying the this ISO channel to the mix and the ISO is still recording it in real time. So I don't know the answer to that. But it sounds like on the F4, it's doing the latter. That is to say, it's not delaying the ISO track. It's just delaying how long before it sends it to the mix track. So good to know. Okay, that may or may not be a viable solution then, what I recommended earlier on. So thanks for catching that, Tom. So, all right. Looks like Greg has a two-part comment here. The calls in the film days were roll sound, sound speeding, then roll camera, camera rolling. Film being far more expensive than film, waited until sound was on speed. Okay, good point. Thanks for that, Greg. And then the second part, a couple of productions I've worked recently didn't even have separate calls, only called rolled camera, and I would have to chime in sound speeding just to not be left out of the game. That's not unusual too. I think most productions, some of the productions I've worked on, they may just rush ahead. You know, you may hear a director call action after camera says camera rolling, but I do the same thing. I just shout it out as well, and they learn quickly. It's been my experience. If not, I'm not sure you want to work for those people again in the future. If they really hate sound that much, then there's no reason to put yourself and them through the torture of doing it on a future job. But everyone that I've worked with has kind of said, "Oh, okay, yeah, we need to wait till sound calls out rolling as well, or speed, whichever." So, thanks for the update or the info there, Greg. Appreciate that. All right, Bang's Naughty Bits. Most low-end Sennheisers have a bright sound. I think it's meant to be cut by wind protection. Okay, it's a good point. Good point there. That'll be something useful there for Just Samson. Thanks. All right, Norm. Have you experienced or heard of an issue with tentacle sync timecode being off, not drifting, with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K? I have not heard of such an issue, and I don't believe I've experienced it. Again, I have not used timecode extensively with the 6K just because I haven't needed to. Usually when I'm using timecode, like last weekend, it was with a red helium. Yeah, it was a red helium, and prior to that time, it was another red helium. Prior to that time, it was a Sony FS5. So I haven't done it a lot with my Pocket Cinema cameras. I'm curious though, Norm, what kind of issue? It's timecode being off but not drifting. Does the Pocket camera just not read it at all? Or I'm curious what your experience has been there. Okay, moving on here. Jack. For an indie filmmaker who does professional freelance work, corporate promo and film productions, is a Zoom F4 to F6 a worthwhile upgrade or straight to sound devices territory? Love your work. Jack, I don't know that... Well, it's an upgrade from the standpoint that it does support the wide dynamic range recording, but I think it's actually a downgrade from the F4 to the F6 in terms of the UI. Personal opinion. Don't anybody, burn me at the stake for saying that, but I think the F6 is not really meant... It's meant more as a kind of a, bag drop type of recorder or a videographer's recorder. If you're going to set it once at the start and then you're going to walk away and, whatever you get, you get. The Zoom F6 will do a better job at that potentially because it has that wide dynamic range recording capability. But if you're, if you do spend the time to kind of monitor your audio and make adjustments during the recording itself, I find the Zoom F4 easy to work with personally. Aside from the screen, I don't love, but the screen on the F6 is better. But the actual controls to me are a little easier to work with. So the thing with this is though, if you can actually rent F6s at a lot of the Lens Rentals to Go and all those places. So you might actually try it one time and just see what you think. It's really a personal thing. In terms of quality of recording, yeah, it could be an upgrade if you need that wide dynamic range recording capability. But keep in mind, if you're using wireless, that's going to be the deal killer as far as wide dynamic range. That is the limiting factor in the signal chain, if you will. So, but it doesn't seem like an obvious upgrade to me, but I would encourage you to try it if you do have an opportunity to rent one for a day and just give it a go. All right. F4 goes on sale for $450 fairly often compared to a Mix Pre 3 at $650. I went Mix Pre, but is there a feature you want that's worth the $200? I agree. That's a good question to ask. And remember, the F4 has dual SD card slots, if I recall, for backup safety. That is true, and the Mix Pre does not. The Mix Pre 2 series have the backup to USB thumb drive, which is not exactly the same thing, but it also does provide some level of redundancy. So, good question there. Alarm Clock Films, I got an Orca bag for the Mix Pre 10 2, despite it claiming it supports the Sony batteries. I'm using the 970s. The recorder will not fit in the bag with the battery attached. What should I do? It's an Orca OR 280. Well, you have a few options. You could return the bag, which may not be ideal. You could also power via a different type of battery. In fact, what I do typically with the Mix Pre 10 is I use that Hiroshi input and a cable. So, for example, I use this cable, which then runs to a cinema battery with a D-tap output. We'll put this down here where we can see it better. Sorry for the wait there. Oh, camera's going to shake a little. Okay, so this cable goes into the Mix Pre's Hiroshi input here. And then I connect a cinema battery to the other end. You could do something like this. This is relatively thin. The thing is, it doesn't have to sit right behind the mixer then. You have a little bit more freedom in where you can put this. I don't know the 280 in particular. I haven't used that one, but I would hope that there's room, or you can even get a smaller, some of the cinema batteries you can get even smaller than that, but this just plugs into the D-tap on the battery. That's exactly what we're doing here with the recorder we're using now. So that's one option. You could return the bag and get a bigger bag. That's another option. Hawk Woods makes some products. Hawk Woods makes, I think they make one that you can use NPF or L series batteries that is oriented differently. So you could potentially fit that into the bag better. So that's worth a look. So those are the kind of the three main options that come to my mind right now. Others may have some other ideas as well. Hope that works out nicely in the end for you. Thanks for the question. Bang's Naughty Bits. The USB recording is more flexible with channels 5 and 6 on the Mix Pre 6. Okay, so good point. So if you are recording to computer via USB, that's another factor as well. Alan, I remember to log in as Alan. Regarding the Nagr 4.2, I do not use it in production, but I do use it in sound workshops to show students how it was back in the day. Okay, cool. Just so everyone gets a sense. Good info. Lau, about the size of the Mix Pre 3, don't let Curtis's hands fool you. They're very big. So the recorder is small, but maybe not that small. Yep, that's fair. My hands are big indeed. I'm 6'7" in terms of my height, and so I have hands to match. And I kind of have spider hands, if you will. So they're especially long fingers. So yeah, the Mix Pre 3 is much smaller than most other recorders I've used, but it's not. You're not going to lose it. you're not gonna misplace it and not be able to see it. So thanks, Lau. Tom, sorry for the sidetrack, but the ATEM Mini control panel, click on the gear in the lower left of the window. Okay, let's try that. Give me just a second here, put that down. Let's pull up the ATEM software again in the ATEM setup. I'm going to go ahead and share this. Gear in the bottom right. No, oh, bottom left. Okay. General. Auto mode. Okay, look. Yeah, it looks like you can change it. I'm not going to change it at the moment, but it looks like you can force it if you wanted to do that. In this case, it recognized that I was outputting 1080p 23.976, so automatically detected it. So to answer your question, yes, good news. It does. I missed that earlier. Thank you for catching that. All right. Hopefully that is good news for you, Tom. Jack, the only negative with the F4 is the limiters. Just coming off a shoot where there was lots of shouting, some good insurance for that would be ideal. Okay, that makes sense, yes, and the mixed pre-limiters are better than what, I think they're better than what you're going to get on the Zoom F series. They won't save you in every situation. Don't think it's a magic bullet, but they are pretty good, and yes, they do work pretty well. So that can be a worthwhile reason. I mean, if you're investing for the long term, I think a Mix Pre 2 series is a good investment at this point. Okay. Greg Palmer confirms on the 10T, the Mix Pre 10T, delay is at the input stage, thus affects the ISO recording and the mix. I do this all the time with AVXs. You delay your boom mics 19 milliseconds, thus all the ISO tracks are in sync. That's great news. Thank you, Greg, for confirming that. So there's a good answer. So actually on the Mix Pre, it does it properly, I would say. Thanks for confirming, Greg. Pocket Cinema read and saved timecode as metadata. All tentacles were in sync. Jammed to audio recorder. Read and audio recorder were bang on. The Blackmagic start time was randomly off clip to clip. Okay. I have not done a multi-camera shoot with the Pocket 6K and timecode, so it sounds like there may be an issue there. And I hopefully, if you contact the technical support over at Blackmagic, they can start to work on that. If hopefully there's a way to address the issue, Norm. So thanks for the info there. And there are people on the Blackmagic design forum who will know if there is an issue. So that's a good place to check as well. Yeah. Thanks, Rory. I can definitely support the bag drop aspect of the F6. Saved me on plenty of occasions, especially solo two-man crews, hard to interview, hold boom, adjust focus, and ride levels with 32-bit, or without 32-bit. Yes, I agree. It is one of those things for somebody who's doing everything. That's where it's an advantage. Tom, on jobs, how often are you feeding cameras, whether XLR or wireless hop? I am feeding them probably 15% of the time, but I'm not doing big jobs. It looks like Alan is here. Alan Williams, Sound Speeds. Alan, how often is your team sending wireless hops? I imagine probably most of the time. And also, Alan says BDS is your solution, alarm clock film. So yeah, you could. I was talking them kind of the more budget solution, but yes, a battery distribution system can take care of that. Then you can use a smart battery like this to power your whole bag, but that's assuming that you're using wireless that can be externally powered from a BDS system. If you're getting into the pro level gear, certainly the answer is yes, but if you're working with consumer level gear, maybe not. Actually, probably in most cases it can be, even the consumer or prosumer stuff can be powered via USB these days, and some of the BDS systems do have USB outputs. Okay. Mark, thanks for joining. Started at 6:02 Aussie times. Sorry for the early start there. All right, Trevor, I assume the delay for Mix Pre 3 and 6 would be the same at input stage, so I should always delay my wireless stuff 19 milliseconds? No, I think the idea is that you delay your wired connections by 19 milliseconds because the wireless are all 19 milliseconds slower. Hope that makes sense, Trevor. And then Alan answers never. They never feed wireless hops to camera. But you're working on big productions, so maybe the smaller ones. And Trevor, yes. Sorry, I meant to say delayed my wired feeds. Okay. All right, here Greg says I feed audio wireless hops 100% of the time, usually timecode also. The hop is a good backup just in case. Okay. Yeah, it really depends on the productions you're working. So sometimes it can be requirement of the job. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We're about almost an hour and a half, good grief, in. Thanks for everybody's questions, comments, input, feedback. It's all very helpful. Appreciate what everyone's doing out there. Get out there and make some great sound, and we will talk to you again soon. Take care, everyone.